So this is our APHuG Students Resource Hub. So you can click here and read more about me, who I am, what I do here. And then right here is like a really long study plan that like you don't have to look at or read, but if you're really curious in class, like these are some resources to learn. And if you're self-studying, this is like a really good pacing tool too. So then besides those, we can go see the resources for the stream today and the live stream info. And then I've put a few like self-paced little lessons things here that I'll review if like you DM me on Slack and you want me to look at anything. So I hope that can help you guys with your AP Human Geography adventures here at Fivebowl. But let's get into some stuff because that's what we're here for, right? I don't want to waste your time. So today, happy Wednesday. You guys just came from school. Hope that you had a good day so far. So today we're going to be talking about AP Human Geography Unit 1, Thinking Geographically. So we're going to go over some content and office hours. And if you guys have ever used the software before, it's called Pear. And basically it's just going to be a little interactive thing where like you can join with this code that I'll give you, and then you can basically like respond to things when I ask you to. And the great thing is that it's like all anonymous, so your name is never attached to any of it, but you can log in when you start, and then basically it'll send you a copy of all your responses and stuff when we get done. Okay, and both of you guys are in now, so we're gonna get started. So today is all about Unit 1. We can go over content Q&A, and then we're gonna go over some content together too. So first things first, follow us at Think5Go on social media. I hope you guys already do, and I hope you're in our community. That's kind of how you got to this live stream, I assume, so hopefully we're all there. But also our social media outlets are where we post all of our cool information, some big upcoming events like orientation and things like that, and then we also advertise all of our applications and stuff like that when we have them. So today, we're talking about AP Human Geography. Welcome to APHuG, guys. We're going to go over the Unit 1 major topics, which are previewed kind of below there for you. Then we're going to go through a review chart together, and we have time for Q&A. And really just like in the chat, tell me to stop, like you guys already know this, or take more time on this, I don't get it, or just like put questions there and I'll take them the whole time. Like that's really what this is about today for you. So there are 4 major topics of Unit 1 here. So the first one is the 5 themes of human geography. The second one is diffusion and globalization. This one is a little less important because you see it a lot in other units too, so a lot of teachers cover it less. And then number 3, geographic data. And number 4, scales of analysis. So basically with these, those are like the major themes that we're going to use in our stream today. So if you're on the Pear Deck thing, you can go respond with one of those 4 numbers that you like feel the weakest with, like that's the one that you know the least about, and that's going to tell me where I need to budget most of the time for tonight. Okay, so let's see. So I see a 1, a 4, and a 2. Or wait, is that 2 2s? I cannot tell. That's not easy to see. That's fun. Okay, so it looks like we have some 2s and a 4. So we'll focus most on diffusion and globalization and scales of analysis. Okay. So here are the 5 themes of human geography. This is going to be one of the most text-heavy slides of the night just because it is a lot of text and it's not a lot of like, this leads to this, which means this, or it's not analyzing stuff. It's kind of just remembering it and finding examples. So these are the 5 themes: place, location, movement, region, and human environment interaction. So for place, it's all about the physical and human features that make a place unique. And so I'm from Texas. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I told you guys that at the beginning. So we're going to have a Texas example for each of these themes of geography. So the human feature that makes Texas unique is people speak Spanish, Latin America, and English. So it's a bilingual place. We'll talk about language more in Unit 3 in this course, but this is one of the first things you can see, oh, this is a human feature. So then we can talk about farms with cattle and longhorns, hook 'em in Texas, and that's a physical and environmental characteristic, and we'll get to that more at the end. So location. People confuse place and location a lot, but location is really just where a place is on a map. And there are 2 types of location, relative and absolute. So here for the Texas example, we have the latitude and longitude of downtown Dallas, Texas. So that's going to be an absolute location because I can point to that on a map and say it's here. Relative location is like where I say I'm 5 miles away from Kroger. It's saying you're this far a place in relation somewhere else. So that's why it's relative relation. So movement, humans move a lot and for a lot of different reasons too. This is part of unit 2 of your course, and it's the last piece, migration. But here we're going to talk about relocation of a person brings their ideas. So we have Tex-Mex food, Texas, Mexico, Tex-Mex. And then we have region, which we're about to talk about more. You divide up the world into little different pieces, like a puzzle. And text example is Deep South, where culture meets a geographic boundary. And then human environment interaction, lastly, is how humans are able to adapt and change their environment and how environment changes to adapt to humans. And so you have Barton Spring Creek in Austin, Texas, and you have tubing, paddling, kayaking going on by humans in this creek where, animals, fish live. Do we have any questions on this so far in the chat? I'll give you guys like 2 seconds to put those in if you have them, but then if not, then I'm just going to move on because this is kind of just you memorize this. And while you guys are doing that, this last column on the right, basically there we have something that we're going to fill in later after we finish all this, and that's going to be our connection column. So let's just keep that in mind. So try to see if we can find a connection to each of these themes throughout the rest of the stream, because this 5 themes is kind of like overarching for this unit and for the course. Okay, so let's talk more about region now. So there are 3 main types of regions. So formal regions are where you have like borders, they're easily defined, and like it's a place on a map. So basically we can look at the different states in the United States and use this map to see data. So this was unemployment rates in different states before and during COVID-19. And then we can compare them and see, wow, there's a lot more unemployment in these states. And you can see the formal regions of each state. So you can see Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and all of the other states like Maryland and New Jersey that you guys are from. So you can see that most of them have pretty high unemployment rates, most of them about 4.5 to 6% during COVID. And then we have our next type of region, which is going to be functional. So they're defined by a central node. So a lot of people think of this as like a pizza delivery zone or a, what else could it be? It could be like an airport or a subway system. But you can also think of it in terms of NBA teams. So there are like major regions that are, that these NBA teams have fans in. So you can see the major teams like Trailblazers, 76ers, Wizards, Thunder, Mavericks, Spurs, Rockets, Pelicans. So there's a central place where these are. So Mavericks would be Dallas, Thunder would be OKC, Jazz would be Salt Lake City, and they have a node around them where their fans are. So the function of the region is they're fans of this NBA team. So then we can talk about the last type of region, which is perceptual or vernacular regions. So it's a place that people believe exists as part of their cultural identity. So this is like what I said earlier, the Deep South, where culture meets a geographic boundary. So people can debate about these regions because they're not formally set. They're the opposite of a formal region. So some people say that Texas is included in the Deep South. Some people say Florida isn't. Some people say Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia aren't Southern, but everything else is. It's up for debate. Some people say Missouri is. It's really what you believe and how you define like your own space in this region. So it's really all about your feelings, because vernacular and perceptual are just like how you see things. It's not how the random invisible Casper the Ghost over there sees things. It's how I see things or how you see things. So we can all form our different opinions on these regions because there's no true boundary, but there's kind of a one that we as humans like to see. Then we've got diffusion and globalization. So for this slide, there are a few different types of diffusion, and you have these little drag things right there, and I'm gonna tell you which colors go to which type of diffusion. So before we even spend time on this slide, let's see if you can identify all of these correctly. So I put in the chat, red marker is hierarchical diffusion, orange is reverse hierarchical, yellow is relocation, green is expansion, and blue is contagious. These are all about the different types of diffusion, and we'll talk about whatever ones we get wrong. If you don't know, then just don't participate in this one, but give it your best shot. Try. You might surprise yourself. Okay, so it looks like all 3 of you are giving this a try. I'm glad to see that. So almost all of you agree that yellow relocation is this map. You were mostly saying that green expansion is this spread of Buddhism map. You're mostly saying that blue is contagious with the COVID. And then we just have some little small disagreements with reverse hierarchical versus hierarchical. And really, these two are kind of interchangeable. So basically, both of them are technically correct because hierarchical is just a pyramid and reverse hierarchical is just a pyramid upside down. So hierarchical is just when like the elites bring the ideas or the thoughts to the masses down below in the bottom of the social pyramid. But reverse hierarchical is just when the masses bring it down to the elites and they get it last because the common people see it first. So we have the picture on the top right of some hip hop artists, some rap. And what we see there is that we mainly call this reverse hierarchical diffusion because it didn't start with the elites. It started with the people on the streets. It started with people in big communities like this one in the picture. And then we see Milan and Paris Fashion Week vlog. This is the stereotypical hierarchical diffusion that you will see on the multiple choice section of your AP Human Geography exam. Like they'll talk about fashion, they'll talk about trends on social media, they'll talk about the internet. Like it's all hierarchical because these really famous, really rich people are wearing these clothes and then suddenly everybody wants to wear these clothes. So really, they're both technically hierarchical, but when you really get down into the nitty gritty, the hip hop is actually going to be orange and the Milan and Paris is going to be red. So let's see. Good job to this person. Good job to this person. You just got that one mixed up. That's really not a problem because technically you're half right. Like it's 3/4 of the way there. The AP exam won't debate you on it, but I might. I don't know. We'll see how this tonight goes. Okay. So next up, we've got geographic data. So most of you guys were pretty solid with this one. So I'll kind of just go through it really quickly. So GIS and GPS. So GIS, Geographic Information System. So if you look at the picture on the left there, you're going to see there are multiple layers of data that you might see from GPS, Geographic Positioning Systems like Google Maps. So on the right there, you see some Google Maps with directions. It's just a one-layer map. But then on the left, you see GIS, which is like a ton of layers of GPS put together. So you have street data, which is like what you see on this map, then buildings data, then vegetation data, then integrated data, where you put all of those 3 layers together. And most of you guys are pretty solid on this, so I won't talk about it anymore. There's nothing to put in this response. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with GIS and GPS. Then we're also going to talk about it in terms of the finished product. So we can see GIS here if we look at the scale. Some of you guys might have to zoom in here, but it's all the way down here. So that's the scale. So we can see capitals, we can see national capitals, state capitals, towns with populations. So we see some dots right there, but then we see some smaller dots here and here, and then all the way even down here in New Orleans. So we see some different size city with different size dots. Then we also see, let's change my color, land elevation right here. So we can see some mountains here, which are the Appalachian Mountains, and then, the Rocky Mountains, and we see the Appalachian Mountains right here. And we can see the land elevation, the contour of the land. You'll talk about that more in Unit 5 when we get to agriculture. And then we finally see the water depth. So we're talking about the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean right there, right? So we can see how deep the water is. So over by the shore, it's going to be, shallower. And then as we get, it's going to be deeper. So it kind of covers a lot of things in this map because it's layering the different data. So we're just taking the basic GPS, we're taking this basic map, and then we're putting a bunch of different layers on it to represent land elevation, water depth, and then different size cities, just in this one map with these different colors I just used. Okay, so we're going to clear this, and if there's no questions, then we can go on. Also, if I see any questions, it's never too late. I'll always go back for them. Okay, density. So this is something you're going to see right when you start Unit 2. It's like one of the first topics that you learn, and it's population density. So here we have coronavirus COVID-19 global cases from Johns Hopkins. So here we can see how there are lots of red dots. So this is a dot map, and you guys were pretty solid on geographic data, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But what you do see is lots of red dots around cities. So I'm going to annotate my screen again, and we're going to see some red dots over here by Seattle, and then we're going to see a lot by San Francisco, some by Dallas, a lot in Florida, lots in the megalopolis up here, which we'll talk about in Unit 7, and then we see a lot in Chicago and Detroit. So there are some really big nodes of this, and then there are some where you see like no dots. So if we look in Nebraska, very few. If we look in Montana, also not a ton. Okay, so basically with density, what we're talking about on this map is COVID-19 cases. So around those major population clusters that we just talked about, we're going to see a lot of COVID-19 cases. So like we talked about San Francisco, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Florida, the major cities in Texas, there are a lot of COVID-19 cases there because there are a lot of people there. And if we know anything about contagious diffusion, like we just talked about on the last slide, we know that we're going to see more contagious diffusion where there's more people, where there's higher population density. So basically, this is what this map shows us. The higher population density, the more COVID-19 cases. So we can make conclusions from this map. And this is one of the main things you'll be asked to do in Unit 1 on the AP exam. Now we're done talking about density and geographic data, and let's take a look at scales of analysis. So this is one of the main geography things in this unit. Like human geography isn't a ton of like looking at maps, like memorizing where countries are, but this unit is kind of about geography. Just some though, not a ton. You don't have to memorize where every single country is, unless your teachers make you, but that's different. So let's look at this map and just like write anything in the responses about like what you see in this map. Just tell me what you see from this view. Okay, I'm going to start taking a look at what you guys have said so far. So some countries have more shading than others do, broken up by region. Yeah. Okay, so we see some really big regions on this map. Like we see things like United States, Canada, the main African regions like North Africa, West Africa, the Middle East, Australia, South Asia. We're going to talk about specific regions like that a lot in this class. We're never going to just say, unless it's like specific to the question, you're never just going to be asked to name that Nigeria has XYZ factors. You're going to be given some stimulus that might tell you that Nigeria has these things going for them, but you're never just going to be able to have to say Nigeria is this, Kazakhstan is this, Somalia is this. You're going to mostly talk about things by region like this. And that's why scales of analysis in this unit are very important, because they show you where you need to be looking. So really, this is all you need to memorize from the world map. You don't even need to memorize the things like Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia. Those aren't as important. You just need to memorize the major land masses. So most of you guys have already got that down. The only things that I see that ever confuse students are like Central Africa or East Africa, just because of where they are on the map. And, Central Asia, sometimes people think that it's where the Middle East is. Those are the only confusions there. But this is what you really need to memorize in terms of geography. And that's the geography you see in this unit. Now let's get more into scales of analysis. So let's take Dallas, Texas, for example. So we're looking at downtown Dallas. On this Google Maps, we can see some things. We can see the Dallas World Aquarium, different places, the Convention Center, Reunion Tower. We can see a ton of stuff like that. But, we can't really see a lot besides downtown like we're just looking at. That's all we see. But we see a lot of stuff in that small area. So now let's zoom out a little bit. So now we see almost all of Dallas City proper. Now you see way less stuff, but you have way more space. So you can still see the 6th floor museum like we saw before in this previous slide right here. But then that's all you see, besides the outline of the city of Dallas and some more major landmarks. So when we're looking at this stuff, we're seeing more space, but less stuff. So let's zoom out a little more. Now we see almost all of Texas and almost all of Mexico, besides Baja. So we barely see any of Dallas. We see the major highways coming in that we just saw in the last picture. Like we can probably see 35 and 20 right there, but we can't see anything inside of it. We can see where Dallas is, but now we can see a lot more space, but we see a lot less stuff. So if we go out even further, we can see virtually nothing besides my pins in Google Maps. And you can see the major world regions that we just talked about. You can see United States and Canada right there, and Mexico. And, you know, what did we just look at? United States, Mexico, Canada. So when we're talking about the scale that we're seeing here, tell me some things that you notice about this map. Like, just write 2 or 3 bullet points, like, what's different in these scales? And if you can't think of an answer to that, tell me what's different in these. What have we talked about in this content review so far that you can see that's different between these two maps? What does the one on the left show that the right doesn't? What does the one on the right show that the left doesn't? This one you have to think a little bit about and make some inferences. Okay, so now I'm gonna go check. So the one on the left has many state names and US country names. The one on the right shows a map with the deserts and the grasslands and the plains. So let's go look at that. So yes, we can see the outlines of states here, the Canada provinces. We can't really see the states of Mexico. But then on the right, we just see more of the continent of North America, but we see a lot more things in terms of geography and climate, you know, because we can see over here in Alaska, like, it's snowy, cold, white. But then over here we can see mountains, hot, dry, desert, just from looking at that. Okay, the one on the right shows the water elevation. It's probably depth. Yes, you're right. Both show land elevation. One shows more of Greenland, one on the right had names of states and provinces. Yeah, so the Greenland part isn't important. But yes, you do see more of the political geography on the map on the left, but on the map on the right, you see more of the physical terrain. Okay, so now we've kind of looked at these maps, identified, but you can also see how GIS and GPS both work together, because Google Maps tells you how to get from point A to point B, but it also shows you a lot of things that aren't even related. You can see the climate, you can see the layout here, and you can see the outlines of all the states. So you can see GIS and GPS incorporated into both of these maps. Okay, so now let's revisit that 5 themes chart now that we've talked about almost everything. So with place, we can talk about cultural landscape and globalization. We kind of didn't go over that one as much in depth because we really hit the diffusion hard, and like, you guys got that right. But really, that just means that, like, the diffusion is causing things around the world to look the same, but it's also causing things around the world to look different because people are having new ideas and they're traveling around the globe and sharing them. So they're changing. So for location, we have scales of analysis. So we're looking at absolute location and relative location, because we can see here that, like, the giant eyeball is pretty close to the 6th floor museum, like, not that far, but it's still kind of far. And we can also see absolute location because we can click on that pin and it'll take us to a location in Google Maps. For movement, we can see relocation diffusion. So we barely talked about that because you guys got that one right on the slides. But with relocation diffusion, you're moving from one place to another. But when you do that, you're bringing all of your ideas and stuff with you in your culture. And you'll talk about that one in Unit 2 and 3 and when they kind of meet. And that's really what you see when you get movement, migration, and relocation diffusion. Regions, the 3 types of regions, we got those. That's easy. We got that. But then human environment interaction. So we have determinism versus possibilism. So let's talk about that one for a second. So the last thing. So it's just basically 2 definitions: environmental determinism and environmental possibilism. So determinism just says the environment determines cultural factors. But environmental possibilism says it's possible for humans and cultural factors to limit the environment or change the environment even. So really, environmental determinism, so you can remember that by the environment determines humans, and then possibilism is just the opposite. So when you talk about human environment interaction here, you're looking at how humans adapt to the environment and vice versa. So that's when you have how humans adapt to the environment is determinism, because the environment's telling the humans that they need to adapt, and possibilism is the opposite. That's the vice versa. And really, that's all the content that we have for tonight. So is anybody here? Okay. Is anybody here on Unit 2 material? That's going to be like populations and migration. I can switch over to talking about that. Okay, so Trevor, do you want to talk about that now? Is anybody else, if everybody else is good, like if you're not concerned about Unit 2, you don't want to learn any more about that right now, you are free to go. Like, I'm not keeping you here any longer. You can keep your time, study for your tests and other classes. You can study for this class, do the practice, and yeah. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on to Unit 2 stuff, and anybody who's here can come, stay, enjoy that. All right, Hannah, bye. Have a great night. Thank you for spending 45 minutes with Five Bowl and me tonight. Okay, so let's talk about this. I don't have a whole Pear deck prepared, but we can just talk through this together using the chat and stuff. Let's talk about Unit 2 a little bit. Just a little bit, though, not a lot. We're mainly just going to talk about vocab because I don't have time to talk about, a lot of content. And we'll focus on the population side since I'm sure none of you guys are to migration yet. So, population and migration vocabulary review. It says review, but it's not really a review. Just like we said, think fiveful, we got that. Okay, so total number of live births in a year for every 1,000 people alive is known as blank. Does anybody want to take a stab at what this is in the chat? Just like big letters you can type up. Oh, looks like we have a chat message. Crude birth rate. Yes, Trevor, good job. So crude birth rate. So crude birth rate is one of those social indicators of development that we talk about in Unit 2. And basically, crude birth rate shows us how many births there are per 1,000. And this can show us a lot about a country's healthcare development. It can show us a lot about how a country, how many births a country has, how many mothers, how developed they are. And this connects to the DTM, which is the demographic transition model that we'll talk about a little bit later if we have time. So we're not going to talk about the DTM yet, but the total number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people is known as crude death rate. So it's just the opposite of crude birth rate. And this also shows us stuff because it's basically the opposite. If a society is really developed and they have really good infrastructure and they have good social security, welfare, they're going to have a higher crude death rate than crude birth rate because they're having more deaths than births. They have an aging population, as we call it in AP Human Geography. And basically, that just means that there are more old people than young people, so more people are going to die than give birth. And that's going to be a problem. We're going to talk about that later with migration. So what does this image represent? We kind of talked about this in Unit 1, but can anybody tell me what all of these dots are showing us? What are these dots showing us? Okay, let's see. Hello? LOL, okay. So basically, this is going to represent population density. So we're seeing how New York, Philadelphia, DC, Boston, we can see how all of these cities have really high population densities because it's a lot of people packed into a small area. When I showed you that COVID-19 map earlier, there were lots of cases where these red dots are right now. And also on the left, you can kind of see Pittsburgh, you can see, Cleveland, you can see Syracuse and Niagara Falls. You can see a lot of different places here that have slightly lower population densities, but it's representing population density. So the total number of deaths in a year among infants under 1 year of age is known as the infant mortality rate. And this is a super good indicator of development. Like, this is one of the best that shows us if a country has good healthcare and developed healthcare or not. So if we take the let's take Uganda. They're going to have a much higher infant mortality rate than the United States of America because we have a healthcare system and we're a pretty developed country. So we're going to have less children dying after birth because we have more vaccines and more cures for diseases, preventable diseases, than they do in underdeveloped countries in Africa because they don't have the healthcare infrastructure. They have cultural limitations where mothers are told that they're there to give birth to children. They're not there to work like we are in the US. We have more economic freedoms. We don't have strict gender rules. Sometimes we do, but that's not, it's not enforced by law like it is in some countries across the world. So this type of density. So if you guys haven't gotten to Unit 2 yet, which I think you mainly haven't, the farmers per square kilometer of arable land is going to be agricultural density. So basically, this is just going to show us how much food your country can produce. So you can see the US does not have a high agricultural density because we've developed a lot of land. And you can look at countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Central and South Asia that have less developed land. Maybe they have a really high population density like India, but they've left a lot of land open. So they have a lot of land to farm, and they have a lot of farmers who are willing to work that land, as opposed to the US where we don't. We see we get a lot of things from other countries, including food. And that's what you can see from our agricultural density. We are on the lowest scale on that map. Okay, the percentage growth of population in a year. It's the crude birth rate minus the crude death rate. Anybody want to tell me what this is? Okay, so you guys are mostly not on this yet. So it's the natural increase rate. So we take our births minus our deaths. So we want to see how much our population is increasing, right? So if we have people being born, we're going to add to our population. But if people are dying, we're going to subtract from our population. And our natural increase rate is going to be how much our population increases naturally. So we're not going to count immigration, or other things we'll talk about in the migration section of this unit. So this structure is a population pyramid, and I'm really not going to get into that today because we don't have a lot of time to discuss it. So this type of population density is called physiological density. So it's not just people divided by land, it's people divided by arable land. So that shows you a better measure than arithmetic density sometimes, because it shows you how much people can live and be sustained by the country's agriculture. So you can not just see that it's farmers, but it's the total people in the country. So now you've seen a lot of countries that had a really high agricultural density on some of these slides before right here, like this one. Like we can see a lot of Central and South Africa and South and Southeast Asia. Now they don't have as high physiological density. And this is a better measure for regular people than for farmers, because we can actually see things that we use. And then this one is the permanent move to a new location. So that's just migration. And we're not going to touch on that stuff a lot, but I want to see if there's anything else we can talk about here. This one, total fertility rate. I knew we were forgetting something. So total fertility rate is how many children a woman will have in her lifetime. So in really developed countries like Japan, Spain, Germany, China, Singapore, United States even, it's pretty low. But in some of the less developed countries like we talked about in Africa, we have Niger, Chad, Somalia, Mali, Afghanistan, South Sudan. They all have really high fertility rates. And if we remember the definition, it's how many children a mother will have in her lifetime. So in the United States, based on this data, which is technically, it's more of the general fertility rate, it's 1.8 in the United States. So each mother will have 1.8 children. And that's kind of weird because you can't have 8/10 of a children. You can't have 80% of a person. But let's say we have a lot of people together. So we have, I don't know how to multiply that to equal, but so let's say we have a lot of people. Then it'll even out because then we'll have an actual whole number of people. But then in countries like Niger, Chad, Somalia, they have a lot of mothers who women, their only job is to be mothers to children. So they're going to have a lot of children. And also, a lot of them aren't going to survive because like we talked about infant mortality rate earlier, not a lot of people are surviving before their first birthday because of diseases and malnourishment. So the replacement level total fertility rate is 2.1. So the 2 comes from there are 2 parents for every child. Whether or not those 2 parents live with the child, that's not the issue of concern here. But there are 2 parents for every child. So we need to be replacing these parents to keep our population the same. And the 0.1 just comes from there are people who don't have babies. About 10% of the population won't. So we need to replace those people too, because they're not having babies, so we have to replace them too. Let's see if there's anything else we need to talk about in note. So those are your major vocabulary for Unit 2. I know I really breezed through that, and if you haven't learned it in class yet, you may have been a little confused, but tell me if there's anything I can talk about or clarify for you. Like, even if you haven't learned it, I will teach you a concept right here if you were like, I kind of get it, but I really don't. Just tell me. Nope. Okay, no questions from Trevor. No questions from Nishika. Okay, great. So stick around if you do have questions. I'll be here for another minute or 2, but then adios, mis amigos. Have a great night. I'm going to respect your time. You can go study for your test. You can go do other homework. You can go do whatever you want now because we're done. Woohoo! Okay, so bye, guys.